Hi, welcome. So as promised, here are five ways to tackle debt. Let's get into it. So in my last video, I gave a quick and witty anecdote of how I got into debt at the age of 19. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and watch it. Jumping right into method number one, we have the snowball method. Now imagine this for a second. Imagine it's winter time and you and your friends about to have a snowball fight. Now you want your team to be victorious, right? You want to knock the domes off of the opposing team. So what you gonna do? Little by little, you gonna pack up a nice big old snowball so that whoever this hit, boy, they going down for the count. This is what the snowball method entails. Starting with your smallest balance, you're gonna work your way up until you get to your largest balances. So let's say you have three balances, a $25, a $30, and a $40. Starting off with that $20, you make sure that that's fully paid off until you move on to that next level. Now there are two ways to achieve this. The first way is focusing all your energy on each individual balance, not worrying about the minimum payments of any of the balances that you have. Kind of think of this like a video game. You have to clear one level in its entirety before you can be granted access to the next level. Now for the second way, think about this like playing a video game but also doing the mini quests on the side. So what you're gonna do is you're still gonna be working your way up from smallest to largest, but you'll also be paying the minimum balances on each of your debts. So let's say you have two debts, a $25 debt and then a $100 debt. If the $100 debt has a minimum that you can pay each month, you'll pay that minimum while still focusing on clearing the entirety of that $25 balance. Now, some benefits of this method include one, baby, them small wins matter. You're gonna get a psychological boost by tackling those smaller balances and demolishing them, that by the time you get to your larger balances, you've gained a momentum and a motivation to continue going. And two, since you're paying smaller balances first, you may have a bit more disposable income. So if you wanted to throw a little bit of money at your larger balances, you could do that, and that could help you in the long run paying less on your debts. Now the cons of this are, one, since you're starting off with your smaller balances, those larger balances are still going to accrue some sort of interest charges because you will be carrying a balance month to month. And two, discipline is really important here, because even though you're paying those smaller balances, like I said, you're probably still going to have some more disposable income. So it's important that you plan for that rather than spending that money or splurging on something or putting yourself into additional debt. Try to invest that or save it or allocate it to the rest of your debt so that you can get that paid down faster. Rolling right along to the debt avalanche. Now this method is the reverse of the snowball method, because rather than starting with your smaller balances, here you'll be starting with your larger balances and working your way or tumbling your way down to the smaller ones. Now a couple pros to this method include, one, you'll be able to pay a lot less interest over time because, you know, your larger balances tend to accrue a bit more interest than the smaller ones. So since you're starting off with the larger balances, you'll have less interest over time and inadvertently pay less. Now for some of the cons of this method, one is if your highest balances are extremely high to the point it doesn't take just one or two payments to eliminate that debt, they're still going to accrue interest over time. So think about how disheartening it could be if you just made a $500 payment to a balance and it accrues $520 worth of interest charges in the next month because you carried a balance. This kind of takes us to the second con, which is you could end up owing a lot more by the end of your debt term, depending on the amount of interest charges that were charged on your debt. Okay, we're moving. So number three is the debt settlement method. Now let's say I'm your creditor and you owe my company, Ruby Incorporated, $3,000 in credit card debt. Now you get that bill in the mail and you look at and you like, I ain't gonna pay that. So you decide to go into negotiation for a lower amount. By the end of settlement negotiations, we decide to settle for 30% less than the original debt amount. So now you only owe $2,100 rather than owing the entire $3,000. Now I don't know about you, but that sounds like a good idea to me. So let's talk about the pros of this. One is that by the end of your debt settlement negotiation, hopefully you'll owe less on your debts than the original debt amount. Now, the second pro to this is that you can avoid your debts from going into collections or being labeled as a charge-off. And a charge-off just means that you have a balance with a creditor. Either you haven't been paying or you've only been paying the minimum and the amount that you owe them is quite great. So they just decide to like, yeah, we're just gonna write this off. We're probably not gonna get our money back. Usually the next course of action is that they will sell it to a collections agency, which will buy the debt, and then you start getting these anonymous calls and these scam likelies, and you like, who calling me? Why am I getting all these calls? That's the collections agency looking for that money. So for the cons of this method, one is that if you decide to go with a third-party negotiation settlement company, they're gonna charge you a fee because baby, they don't work for free. Hey, but don't you worry, because you can actually do the negotiations on your own. Just be mindful that if $600 or more of your debt is forgiven, you may have to pay taxes on that amount. But I've left a helpful link in the description box below just to get you started with this process if you do decide to do it on your own, or to give you resources if you decide that you do want some additional help. Link below. And the other con, which is like any negotiation between two parties where they're trying to find a common ground, it's gonna take time, effort, and some resources. So be aware of that before going into it. Fully know what your capabilities are and adjust accordingly. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but it feel like we on a roll. So number 4 is debt consolidation. And in this method, you can take 2 or more of your debts and consolidate them into one account or payment. If any of your debts have a higher interest rate currently, by consolidating them, you can actually lower your interest rate, which, you know, of course, you'll pay less over time. Now for the first con of this method. If you miss a payment, this can be detrimental to your credit. And the reason why is because it's a much larger sum. Imagine missing a $500 payment versus missing maybe a $30 payment. The effects are just different. Now for the second con, depending on your credit history, your credit types, the amounts that you owe, you can actually potentially be paying more in interest rates than if you were to just keep all your balances separate. But baby, all I gotta tell you, resources, because there's a link down below of a debt consolidation calculator, and you can plug in your income, the amounts that you owe, the interest rates attached to each of those amounts, and just, you know, throw it in a pot, stir it up, see what it gives you, see what that monthly payment amount should be, and see if it works for your budget. Number 5 is balance transfer, and it kinda is what it sounds like. You transfer a balance from one account or one creditor to another to unlock lower interest rates or promotional advantages such as 0% APR for an intro period. And that just means that for, let's say it says 0% APR for 6 months or something like that. For those first 6 months that you have an account open with this credit lender, they will give you 0% interest. So you'll accrue no interest on the balance that you're holding with them. So I was just thinking about this before we continue on with the pros, but it's something that's funny, not in a ha-ha way, but funny in like a damn, that's kind of sad, somebody should really do something about that, is if you have good credit and you get into debt, you get all these resources, you get all these methods that you can utilize to get yourself out. But if you don't have good credit, or you just don't have enough money to pay, or anything isn't working in your favor, it's like, damn, you should like really pay your debts off, and you should really make sure that they don't accrue interest over time, because that would suck if you owe way more by the end of this year than you owed at the beginning. And it's like, it's this perpetual cycle, because all of these methods you can't fully utilize. I mean, besides the snowball and the debt method, because it's so individualistic that it's just based off of how much you owe and all your debt payments and what order you want to pay everything in. But for the rest of them, it's like you can't really effectively fully use debt consolidation unless, one, you just get lucky and you're able to find someone who's able to work with you if you have bad credit, or 2, you just swimming up shit's creek. That's just not cool. That's just not cool. I promise my little tangent was going somewhere, because now for the cons, one of which being that credit or credit history can provide some limitations on different interest rates that you can access / some of the promotional advantages that you can switch over to. Another con is that balance transfer can actually charge a fee between 3 to 5% of whatever balance you're transferring over. So let's say you have a debt balance of $500. It's going to charge 3 to 5% of that $500 for you to open a balance transfer account. I just wanted to say that I've thrown out a couple terms such as interest rates or APRs, annual percentage rates. And if you want a dedicated video to what those things are, what their significance could be in your life, or just how to wrap your head around those terms, feel free to comment that down below. I'll be more than happy to make a video. I went to college for this and I use it in my day-to-day in my career, so that's the least that I can do. But since it's getting dark, a message from my future me. Well, that's all I have for you today, but I do want to take the time to say thank you for watching. It really does mean a lot. If you're feeling a little extra frisky, feel free to subscribe because I upload every Monday and Saturday. Thank you. Until next time.